Hello, BookTube. I want to give you a kind of a Monday morning report on some of the reading that I did this weekend. Not all of it, but some of it. I like the sort of touching base aspect of that. I don't do it enough. So I thought I'd go through some of the books that I read, and we'll start on the mini-me with some ebooks, all of which I think I talked about on my Friday reads. The first one is Stephen Graham Jones, The Only Good Indians. The mini-me comes out fairly well as far as reflections go. This is a contemporary horror novel, psychological horror, ambiguous horror. Very, very good. I praise this author enormously on my Friday reads. He can do no wrong, as far as I'm concerned, just on a level of prose, and that works in this book. I'm not the target audience for this kind of writing, whereas some of his earlier books, I'm very much not the target audience for. At least horror novels I have read. I've read my Dean Koontz and my Robert McCammon. But some of his earlier books, I'm not the target audience for at all. Not whatsoever. They don't touch with me in any way, except that I love the way he writes. And some of the others are straight up police procedurals, detective novels, that sort of thing. This is an author who tries his hand at pretty much anything. And this had huge chunks that I just loved. Just thought it was fantastic. So that was a very good reading experience for the weekend on the old ebook. I did not read it on the mini-me. In fact, I know a lot of you are going to be disappointed about this, but I didn't read it on my Kindle either. I read it on my iPad. I've been experimenting with electronic reading. I'm doing a lot more electronic reading since quarantine started than I ever did before. So I bought a Kindle Paperwhite, and I also downloaded a bunch of reading apps on all of my other machines. I have an Amazon Kindle Fire, an 8-inch Kindle Fire, that I left the way it is. I left it unmolested, and I tried reading. I charged that and started reading on it. I also have a bright red Kindle Fire, an 8-inch Kindle Fire that I tinkered with. I did a little bit of hacking on it to allow me to install the Google Play Store. And the Google Play Store gave me so much more readability, so much more stuff that I could do. Project Gutenberg and the Nook app and a bunch of other stuff. And I have been reading on that as well, and I've been reading on my Paperwhite, and I've been reading on the mini-me. But I have found, at least in the last few weeks, I don't know if this will stay true, I've found that by far the most immersive, the most enjoyable reading that I'm doing is on my iPad, the full-size iPad Air. I don't know if that's a function of the fact that I'm not going anywhere anymore. I did once upon a time. I've done a large amount of reading on my phone. I'm filming on it, so I can't show it to you. But it's a great big iPhone 7S with enormous amounts of storage. So it's almost. I mean, it's half the size of a Kindle Fire. Perfectly comfortable to read on, but I don't go anywhere anymore. I'm not going to read on my phone if I don't go anywhere. And the iPad has something that for me is an attraction. It has a huge amount of accessibility. I know that is the exact opposite of a Kindle Paperwhite. It doesn't have any accessibility at all. It's only meant for reading books. And whereas the iPad, I have my weather apps, my radar apps, my Twitter, my Instagram. I have Voxer. You're all welcome to Voxer me. I keep forgetting. A lot of you keep reminding me that if I want people to Voxer me, I should leave my Voxer information down below. And also, I leave my email down below, my Twitter, and my Instagram, and that's it. And I've received over the last few weeks a number of emails saying, leave your Voxer, and also you should remind people that you have a Patreon. Some people might want to pledge you money, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a scam artist at all to remind people of that, because otherwise you wouldn't know. And so I might do that. I might add those two things. But my iPad has all of those things on it. And the reason why Kindle Paperwhites and Kobo e-readers and things like that make such mileage out of not having those things is because most people, I'm not looking at you, Gen Z, most people can't control themselves. I wish I could expand on that. I wish I could narrow that down, but unfortunately in the 21st century, in the year 2020, it stands just as a simple declaration. Most people can't control themselves, or won't control themselves. So if you give them a tablet, a full-color, a Wi-Fi tablet that has all of those apps, they won't spend any time reading, even though it's reading that they want to do, because they won't stop themselves from just wandering off. And I'm not prone to that problem. My attention is completely under my own control. So it isn't hurting me at all to have a big, bright, app-filled tablet. And the only other hurt that I was told was strain on your eyes. And the blue light is a strain on your eyes. And I hadn't noticed any kind of eye strain, and then and I wondered why. Naturally, I worried. I thought, okay, maybe you're straining your eyes and you don't know it. Maybe in a few years you'll pay the piper for this. But then I thought, no, you've been reading on an iPad for well over 10 years, and nothing's happened, and it would by now. And degradation like that wouldn't creep up so long. And if degradation takes 40 years to happen, well, then I'm okay with it. But then I realized, how would you even know that the light coming off an iPad was quote-unquote blue? I think the main reason that you would know that, and therefore the main reason that you would have eye strain, would be if you were reading on the iPad at night in bed with no other source of light. Well, that's a terrible idea anyway. I don't do that anyway. I read on the iPad during the day. Mostly, almost always during the day, when I don't think I'm suffering from any kind of blue tinted light or anything like that. And the thing to remember about reading on a device at night in low light or with only the light that the device is casting is that that's bad for you anyway, because that light is uneven. It's causing your eyes to shift backwards and forwards. It's constantly shifting to the brightness or dimness of that light. When you're reading at night, in addition to a lit screen, you also need a steady source of light. You need a lamp on. Otherwise, you're straining your eyes no matter what, whether you're reading a Paperwhite or an iPad. But one way or another, so far anyway, I'm not giving up on anything, but so far the bulk of my reading is being done on my iPad. Not the Mini-Me, but I'm showing you on the Mini-Me, and the next book, the next ebook, the 3 ebooks that I want to show you. The next one is another one I mentioned on Friday, and it's Beast Boy. How are we doing? I just praised you, Mini-Me. You see, he has sort of a fleshy... Let's see. There we go. That is what it looks like. This is by Cami Garcia, and Gabriel Piccolo does the artwork. It's a YA graphic novel about a character from DC Comics, Garfield Logan, named Beast Boy, who has green skin, and he can transform into animals, any kind of animal, and they also are green. And he retains his human intellect when he transforms into these animals. I had one of you leave a comment. I mentioned that I thought it was strange that this YA novel had a cis white male hero, when YA novels simply don't have that anymore. They simply don't do that. And one of you left a comment saying that since Garfield Logan has green skin, he is by definition not white. If you're clever enough to leave a comment like that, then you're clever enough to know what's wrong with it. That's it. He is most certainly a cis white hetero male. And I had reservations about this book, and unfortunately they were borne out. The artwork's not all that good. It certainly wasn't my cup of tea. And the storyline followed through with exactly my worry, which is, if you have a story in which a teenager feels like a misfit and is willing to do anything to curry the favor of the cool kids at his school, even if it means distancing himself from the not so cool kids who are obviously his real friends, only to learn that lesson at the end of the book, then you already have a YA novel. You already have a novel that you can either do well or poorly. There is no reason, and it is very jarring, to add to that the fact that your misfit main character can transform into animals. That's a different novel. The two elements don't mesh together in this book at all. And, like I mentioned on Friday, all of the benefits that you would get from having this be Garfield Logan, having this be Beast Boy, a character in DC Comics for 50 years, are negated by the fact that you're totally remaking him. You're revamping him from the ground up. So, oddly enough, this Beast Boy graphic novel left me wanting a Beast Boy graphic novel. What a story there is to tell. What a story there is to tell about this character who was who grew up under the care of a megalomaniac scientist who adopted him, and in the quasi-duplicate sense of that word, both as a ward and as a pet, and who's the leader of the Doom Patrol, Beast Boy's first superhero team, is obviously more interested in him as a specimen, as a phenomenon, than he was as a person. That story is amazingly more interesting than anything in here, I guess, and also seems more self-evident. if you're going to write a book about this character, a character that you'd be sued if you used on your own, so obviously DC Comics cares something about him. If you're going to do that, why not tap into that background? But this book doesn't at all. So I was just nonplussed by the whole thing. The last of these ebooks, I liked, and I should do a whole video on why I sound so reserved when I say that I liked it. This is Andrew Gray. This is the very first Andrew Gray novel I've ever read. It's a gay novel called Catch of a Lifetime, in which a character who is struggling at ends can barely make even a fraction of the rent necessary for him to live in a closet on his mattress in New York City is called back to his small town in Florida. His father has an accident. His father works on a fishing boat and can't keep up the work. Even before the accident, it was obvious that he needed help. And as the boy's mother, Artie's mother, tells him, there's no one else. There's no one else that we can ask. There's no one else that your father would accept this help from except you. So he has to go back home. And it feels like a defeat, but his sense of defeat grows as he gets there. That aspect of it is really well done. He is in shock at first. And it's when he's home in Florida, he meets a gorgeous boy who they quickly develop feelings for each other, and that is the bulk of the book. And it was really well done for what it is. The characters are sketched out immediately. They are sketched out quickly and efficiently. What's happening is clearly and efficiently described, and you're never in much doubt how the book is going to end. And all that is good. I'm not slighting any of that. All of that is good. And I'll have to read the rest of Andrew Gray. We'll download another Andrew Gray today and read it next weekend. But I have a feeling I know what I'm going to find, because this is like so much else gay fiction that I have read. It is safe, extremely safe, and extremely simple. It just flows along on a what happened next plot. The reason why the prose is so clear is because it takes no chances whatsoever. Now, I don't mean to slight that, because there are plenty of authors in the world who mean to take no chances. They mean to write clear prose, and it is beyond their ability to do that completely. I know there are those authors because I review one of their books, their self-published books, every single day. Literally, every single day I read and review such a book. That's, in case you didn't do the math, that's well over 350 such examples every year. And that's been true for years. So I know there are authors out there who do this sort of thing poorly. This is not done poorly. This is done professionally. But where's the rest of it? Where's the fire, the art, the risks on the prose level? Now, maybe this author, maybe Andrew Gray, knows that he can't pull that off and is sticking to his lane. That could be. I will read some of his other books, but I'm thinking of, and maybe it's not fair for me to do this, but I just hauled on this channel just a little while ago the debut novel by John Fox called Boys on the Rock. It's a debut novel. It's old. It has all of its flaws right on its face, and yet it is so much more than this book. And that's not taking into account, the much better known books like A Boy's Own Story or Dancer from the Dance or things like that, where these are by masters of gay fiction. I'm not expecting every single ebook that I download onto my Amazon app to read that way. All of this is completely sincere. It's completely on the surface. The struggles that Artie especially has, he's the best realized character, are totally believable and affecting. There are a couple of scenes, especially at the end, that are affecting. But it's all fairly safe, and that is just not a word that I associate with gay fiction. And maybe I should. Maybe I should. Maybe I should associate it not so much with contemporary gay fiction, but with contemporary self-published fiction, which would be even more of a scandal, because self-published fiction has no hoops to go through, no gatekeepers to reject it. It should be the most daring fiction of all. And the one thing I can say about this book, it was pleasing, it was readable, it was satisfying, the end was satisfying, but it was not daring at all. So I don't know. I will read another Andrew Gray, and we will see. But that does it for the ebooks. And I want to show you a few more things that I read this weekend. First of which is a little bit bittersweet. It's great in its own way. It's this, Science Fiction Century, edited by David Hartwell, a great editor, great science fiction editor. And I pick this thing up all the time to read it, and I marked out the stories that I read this time around because I picked some authors that I don't typically like. A.E. Van Vogt was one of them. Where is he? Okay, Richard Lupoff. I read Sail the Tide of Morning. That's Mourning. I read Something Ending by Eddie Burton, and I read an A.E. Van Vogt that I can't actually see here. Oh, Enchanted Village. So I read 3 stories out of this that were like that, and none of those 3 stories made me think that their authors were someone that I needed to revisit right away in toto. So maybe I need to read more. Certainly when it comes to A.E. Van Vogt, I have a lot more to read because I got a lot of these science fiction anthologies during quarantine, and he's in a lot of them. So, and his was probably the best of those 3. I kept myself to 3 stories in this, and that was great. Experimenting, figuring out what those authors are like and trying to extrapolate it with anything that I remember reading about them was a lot of fun. The bittersweet thing was I got this on eBay for a song, and I was very happy with it. It came with the library plastic dust jacket, but it isn't going to stand the strain. It's already breaking, which is a shame. I don't think I'll probably play around with it anymore because it's just going to fall apart. So I need to go back on eBay and see if there's another copy maybe that will be in better shape, something like that. I know one thing for sure. Every time I have a copy of this, I give it away. And every time I have a copy of this and revisit it, I'm always reminded of why I keep re-getting it, because it's so good. It's such a great anthology. So one thing I know for sure, I definitely want another copy. Whether it's in hardcover or in paperback, I want another copy. But it can't be this one. There's no way that if it were something else, but this is just the outer covering of the book is breaking away from the block of inner pages, and there's nothing I can do about that. So, but it was great to revisit those authors and to really visit a couple of them for the first time. I don't remember reading anything by the other 2 authors. Then I was reading that anthology and I was thinking, boy, even these authors that I don't know and that I'm not particularly enjoying, they are so much themselves. I mean, this anthology covers a century or more. And the stories, most of them, just bristle with individuality. And I was thinking about much, much more recent science fiction anthologies, even by a great editor like Gardner Dozois, and that has a huge number of stories, some of which will be by the same authors, but most of them not. And I was thinking, in those newer anthologies, when it's an author I don't know, they all read a lot more like each other than any of the authors I don't know in these older stories do. The older stories seem to have much more individuality than the newer stories do. And I was thinking about that, and I landed on the bugaboo, the natural suspect for such a conformity, and that is MFA programs. I'm not the first person, especially the first critic, to lambaste the uniformity, the homogeneity of the products that tend to come out of MFA programs, especially now that you virtually need an MFA degree in order to publish a book anymore. It used to be that there were only a handful of places in the country, MFAs in the country, and it was very much an excess. You didn't have to do that. And I know that a lot of authors don't, but nowadays when I get, back when I used to get 20 books in the mail every day, and the contemporary fiction, the new contemporary fiction, the one with flowers on the cover, I would, when I turned back to look at the author's biography, I was just expecting to find out. My question would be, okay, where'd you get your MFA? Because I almost never read biographies like that don't have it. And that started getting me a little wroth. It's not hard to get me irritated on the subject of writing workshops, and one writing workshop in particular. And that writing workshop in particular came to mind, and I realized when I was thinking about that, when I was aggravating about those short stories, science fiction short stories, I realized that I had just recently, like a year ago, got a book on the Iowa Writers Workshop in Iowa City, and that it was long since due for a reread. So I found it. I looked around and I found it. It's this, A Delicate Aggression, Savagery and Survival in the Iowa Writers Workshop by David Dowling. And this is all about the history of the workshop under Paul Engel and Frank Conroy and Jack Leggett and a bunch of other people with famous graduates coming in and out, and what the culture of the workshop was like. And it's really well done. I'm glad that I reread it. I'm glad that I'm glad that I kept it. It's the perfect sort of thing that I thought. I was at first worried that I had not kept it, but I did. So that was great. That was fantastic to read. I think it may be my favorite book on the Iowa Writers Workshop. It was more of them than you would suspect. And then I also did a little reading. I got this book just recently at the Brattle. This is The Sea Battles on Dry Land by Harold Brodkey. And it's just a collection of essays, nonfiction of all types on all subjects. And I was paging through it, just sort of wondering when I would get tired and which piece I would land on. I didn't go into it with an agenda. I didn't zero in straight away on the literary stuff. And I got to a couple of essays that he does on gardening. And I read those, and they were delightful, absolutely delightful. The usual Brodkey mix of sticking to his subject and then losing his train of thought in order to get distracted by erotic thoughts, by physical thoughts, by very visceral, somatic thoughts. That happens in his fiction, happens in his nonfiction. It's always delightful to do. I think it is highly controlled. But I read his pieces on his delight in gardening and had a blast. I really enjoy reading about gardening, and I didn't before a few years ago when I started to toy with the idea of planting a garden on my own. And when I was looking at some of these pieces by Brodkey, I was thinking, I have some of these. I have some of these pieces of his that I pulled out of whatever literary journal they were in and folded and put in a folder somewhere. I wonder where they are. If I have a book, I don't need them anymore. Or if I certainly shouldn't keep them in a folder. If I have them and I want to keep them, I should stick them in this book. And so I briefly dug around in a pile of boxes and folders, and you know what that's like. I found a big fat folder of all sorts of miscellaneous stuff, not just documents, but whatever I chose to stuff in there. I brought it over to the couch in front of the window fan, and I opened it and started going through it. I found a bunch of stuff. Letters and documents and pulled out and folded book reviews and book essays that do not belong in folders. Absolutely not. They belong in books. I don't want any of those in folders where I'm never going to look for them. I want them in books where I will inevitably find them. If I pick this off the shelf, I want it to contain all of that stuff. I don't want to have to think, well, I have the book and I have my annotations in the book, but what about all the pieces about Brodkey? I need to go and find them. No. They all have to be in that one place. Files. No. I don't want to do that. I did that for years. I don't want to do that anymore. So I was pulling out all of those folded book reviews in order to review them and then find a home for them. And when I was in that folder, I found something else. What it was doing in there, I have no idea. I found a packet of seeds. Now, I have no idea how old this is. I believe this was a gift from the old farmhouse in Vermont. I believe it was. So it can't be that old. But it says, this is a gardener's starter kit. You've got hollyhock, echinacea, Shasta daisy from Alaska, and coreopsis in packets. Now, I don't know how old these things are, and it occurred to me when I looked at those things that I also don't know how long seeds live. Are seeds even alive? Can you take a 100-year-old seed, put it in the ground, and have it plant, have it sprout, or whatever seeds do? But I was reading those Brodkey essays on gardening with a wistful air because I'd sort of given up on gardening. It's late June, and then I found this, and I figured, what's to lose? So I'm going to take some of those hollyhock seeds and plant them outside. I'm going to do that tomorrow. And I will water them, and then we will see what we will see. We'll see what happens. We'll see if it ends up being anything, if anything happens. I believe the hollyhock package said that they sprout in a few days. Germination is 12 to 21 days. So if I put them in there, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know if the soil's right for them. I'm not going to do anything like that. I don't have access to a gardening center. I'm not going to right away or take soil samples or anything like that. I'm going to plant some of these hollyhock and see what happens. And if anything does, I will report back. I don't know if I will be overjoyed by having hollyhocks. According to this thing, they're fairly dramatic looking. Fairly tall and fairly dramatic looking. I couldn't pick a hollyhock out of a police lineup, but I would love to see it if I could grow such a thing. But I don't know if it'll either be that or it will be the old New Yorker cartoon with the society matron who's at her local gardening center, and she's complaining to the man behind the counter. She says, "I put them in the dirt last spring, and that's the last I've seen of them." I don't know if that'll be me. It could easily be me. I will report back, and so I will owe my garden not only to all of you who have encouraged me over the years, but also to Harold Brodkey, which is pretty much the last thing I would expect. I found these things. They can't be that old. I wouldn't have kept them before I started thinking about having a garden. I would have thrown something like this away. So this can't be that old. Are these any good? Do seeds go bad? I don't know. I don't know if they do or not. I'm going to give it a try. I will plant them. I will water them. I will water them again. I will remember to water them. And then we'll see. So that's my Monday morning report. That was a large selection of the stuff that I read this weekend. I did a lot of other reading. I did a lot of Kirkus Review reading, a lot of Deadline Review reading, I wandered all this way and that. But I wanted to give you sort of a check-in, just because I've always thought that I might like to do this on a regular basis. So I will do a Friday Reads, and I'll do another Monday check-in next week. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.